Somebody made a valid point in my comment section of the last reaction. It was Nexonin, and they said that I hadn't listened to the Ruina versions of the first, second, and third warning. They're right, I listened to just the one version and decided that I would get to these eventually, and never did, so spooky vibes aside, I think I should get to that, don't you?
And no, of course, I'm not going to be doing the whole video like that, as thematically intriguing as that may have been. It's just kind of hard to see in the dark, because my room was entirely dark aside from my screen, an LED pole to my side, and an LED panel light over here. So it got really difficult to see basically anything. The lights in the back were on too, but like those really don't illuminate anything. So it's just in general very dark in here, and I need to be able to see. So I guess without further spooky ado, let's go. I was right, they are gonna be spooky. I know these are kind of remixes, I guess, of the others, but I'm kind of listening to them with a fresh ear because it's been a long time since I've heard the originals. Ooh, get him. I love the subtle creepiness this has. Ooh, that bass crawl. This really is just slightly unsettling. This is a really good first. I really love that. That like bass whir downward. It's a really cool ramp. Little sound design there. These creaks and screeches that are happening at random. Really nice detail for the world building at this point. Really love that bass. Ooh, a change up. Woo. Double time the strings. This first warning starting to wrap up. It's like, okay, fix it. Fix your shit. Raising the tension. Are they gonna release it? Probably. Yep. There's the release of tension right there. So they're giving you a final chance. And like the inverse sound at the end. Dude, okay, yeah, this is, in my opinion, already better, and I haven't even gotten to the other two yet. I remember the original warnings being really interesting listens, and I did not re-listen to them before this just because I wanted to have that fresh ear going into it, and therefore I might restate some stuff between each version that I'm just re-experiencing. And this one, I love how haunting it is. I do say that quite often. There's a lot of haunting music in games, especially ones like this that are kind of horror and horror adjacent songs. So like this feels so good. These little dances on the bells, like the glockenspiel sound in here is so clean, subtle too. Like it's there, it's obviously there, but it's not taking over the whole mix, and that's really nice. So you just barely hear it, and you're like, ooh, what's this kind of weird, fantastical tone dancing around in the background? That's that. And then, of course, you get that bass whir, like I had mentioned. That might be a weird term for some people, whirring, but that's kind of what it is. It's like a winding down sort of effect, and that's very sound design-esque there, having that sort of extra space be added as it goes along. It's a sound we've all come to correlate as like something being shut down. That sort of whirring down is a mechanical tone that we've all just associated to something losing power. So that definitely fits in the context of the song and of the game. It's the kind of the first thing that would be like, oh, something's not right here. And that's a great sound element to throw into a song that's supposed to get that exact response out of you and start making you think more. Speaking of, later in the song, like the latter quarter of the song, that had an amazing buildup of all this extra tension, all that extra speed coming in, the strings going a little double time in there and just making you go like, hey, time to fix it, but then it still releases it at the end, like I mentioned. So there is a little bit of leeway there at the end of that song to either build into a much more aggressive version of this, which I assume might be where the second phase or the second warning might start, but it also might just be its own thing. But it could have just been a tension release for the sake of allowing the listener, allowing the player to kind of get their shit together for the last couple seconds before they lose whatever they were working towards. And especially at the end, that last little inverse texture of having these bells be inverse. Like, those were bell samples, but they were played reverse. Why? Because it sounds kind of creepy. It sounds unnatural. Having anything done in reverse is a pretty classic time-tested way of making a human feel just weirdly uncomfortable. It's an uncanny valley sort of response. Like, you know it shouldn't sound like that. Therefore, why does it? And now I'm concerned is kind of what that gets out of you. So there's a lot of sound design stuff going into this one that, again, I might be retreading water from the last ones from Limbus Company, but I'm not sure how similar they are. I was just told that they're kind of remix-esque. They might be just borrowing the overall leitmotif. I'm not sure exactly how aggressive that is, but I want to listen to number 2. So let's go. Ooh, yeah. Yeah, this would tail right off of the fast strings from the last one. Great transition spot. Great writing. I wonder if this is going to kind of keep up the same principle as the Limbus Company ones, where it gets really energetic through this one, and then the third one gets like hellish. I kind of wonder if that's what that's going to be. I suppose we'll find out, but first we got to get through some breakcore here. See, this has a lot more tension on it. Release of that tension again. But right into a bunch of strings that are just like trampling themselves over. They're falling. There's a lot of dissonant tension in the strings for this. Oh, there was a great one there. Yeah! Ooh. This is extremely stressful. Ooh. Got some bit crushing going on in there. Oh, that's cheating. I'll get into that. I love it, but I'll get into it later. I'm kind of just vibing with it, actually. Whew. Really? Ooh, throwing in some synths. I wonder if that's where it would transition into the third. That would make sense too. Ooh, we got things. We have things. This one's gonna be fun. So this is actually really interesting because it's doing stuff that I honestly don't think a normal average composer would be able to figure out why it's working versus why like the song sounds the way it does. Why does this sound so concerning? Because like, yes, it's fast. Yes, it has some tension in there, but all of it is more sound design than it is actual composition. Like the music itself doesn't have all that much tension in there. There's a few spots for sure where there's some weird dissonance, a lot of like notes that are chromatically close and just not really, gelling well in the traditional style of music. And what makes this more centric on sound design is all of the tones they're using. Like, for example, in there I mentioned that there's like this bit crush sort of sound. There's like this 8-bit processed sort of tone in there. And those are hitting weird off hits of like the rest of the music. So like that is harmonically clashing with what the rest of the song is doing, and it's sounding so off-putting. It almost gives me the vibes of like the original Lavender Town OST from Pokemon Red and Blue. It's very much that same sort of principle where things just sound a little off, and where in that case that's the whole song and it's written specifically to do that in 8-bit tones, so it sounds really weird. For the record, square waves, very just generally unsettling. For those who don't understand what that means, I've referenced Sawtooth in the past, but they're all different types of tones that you can create, and those exist in all of sound. They're not necessarily specific to just video game music, for example. They are used in everything, and all of music and all of sound is just a gigantic amalgamation of every single one of those types of tones at different frequencies. But that's getting really nerdy and shit. The reason that this sounds so specifically jarring is that square tones like that just aren't really natural. They're very artificial. And while I just said they do exist in all of noise, they exist as you're hearing my voice right now. There's some in there. But at the same time, isolating those is a very interesting experience to the ear. It is a tone that most of the time is made by electronic devices, not something that is organic like a normal voice would be. Whereas like all audio is made up of all these different tones and shapes and sound values and yada yada yada, square tones almost exclusively on their own as a solo unique thing don't just happen in nature. So that is adding to what I said prior about it just sounding off, something that's a little uncanny, throwing that in there. Not to mention that it also has weird note clashes with the rest of the sound around it that is played by more traditional instruments, stuff that's a little bit more organic in tone and has a different sound profile altogether. It's really, really cool to hear those clashing. So like this having square waves up against something that's a lot more standard, like a violin sample, would feel off. It's why you don't hear that a lot in normal composition. It's something that just doesn't gel at all. So it's really neat. I love this sort of sound design stuff around here. And much like before, they did the same kind of thing where they started soft and subtle and then immediately hit it with some more energy. Whereas this one started at a different level. It started kind of where the last one left off with its energy. This one takes that and brings it up another notch, introducing that breakbeat, having more tension, more energy. Having breakbeat in there is a tension. Breakbeat is not, again, one of those things that you're used to normally hearing in organic music. It's a little too quick and it doesn't really allow the brain to process it through until it's moved on. It's the same reason why people use it in like bullet hell titles or rhythm games. Like really challenging maps on rhythm games are that sort of song where they have a lot of that mess of percussive noise, and it can be very difficult to follow. This wasn't as fast as I've heard breakbeat go, but it's just fast enough that it doesn't let you really get a hold of it. You start feeling it, you still kind of vibe with it. It's still a beat after all. We are humans. We kind of are slaves to the beat at the end of the day. But when you get down to how this is affecting the rest of what's around it, it feels so tension heavy because of all the stuff I mentioned before about all those tones clashing. there's just not room to go anywhere. So that feels even worse in a good way compared to the last one. Whereas this song is doing exactly what it's supposed to do and make you feel more stressed. It's supposed to be that turning point of, can you fix it at that first phase, to this one going, no you can't, you have fucked up now, and we're not going to let you go without a warning, no pun intended. So bringing the energy back down from here would be kind of difficult, but that's why I think at the end of this is a really intriguing switch too, because much like the last one where it had that section that was faster, that would have led into this, and then it released all that tension at the end, this one went back down, but only in the last couple of seconds, where it's like, okay, maybe that's where it would just kind of flutter out and then start with the first phase again. So this is really intriguing. I love how these are connecting together. And now I gotta stop yapping and listen to what the third phase has in store for me. So I wonder if it's that hellish landscape sort of energy like the last one was, where you are just done, nothing you do is gonna fix it, or if it's gonna be this, but even bigger, more grand, more energy. I would be impressed to see where that goes, but we won't know if I don't get there. So let's go. Ooh. Okay. Little sound design scrapes there. Ooh, a lot of sound design. A little bit of synth. Maybe they are going to bring in that synth from the end of the last one. But much like the other ones from Limbus Company, this is dark. This is the, you're done, son. You can't get out of this. They're coming for you. Nothing says you're going to hell like a bunch of long, droning, boastful brass at the bottom and a bunch of arpeggiation on the top. In a minor key. A major key, it might sound more like a superhero. But that's how music theory do. Building up the energy though, still. I'm hearing some of that synth in there. It's supporting the brass. Wait a minute. I think that sound, that scraping sound, might have been like fingers on an air duct. That's such an, that's a great detail. That's so impressive. Oh, I love this one. Oh, what a beautiful chord there. Such beauty in this hell? You're telling me there's a chance for redemption right now? Ooh. Oh, maybe not. Yeah, and that would just kind of swell into whatever they needed to go back to from there. That's a good transition as well. This has so many things to talk about. This video is going to be so long, dude. So this started out exactly as I thought it was going to, with the whole feeling like you're now in hell and you have fucked up. That's exactly the tone they're going for here. It was doing very similar things to what I remember the Limbus Company version was doing, where it just, everything felt worse. You know, like there was no fixing the problems here. But then it did something really interesting to me, which on top of all the sound design stuff, which I will get to in a second, it changed its tone around the 2-minute mark to this grand, high-flying, very optimistic sound. It moved itself to like major chords, and it was like, oh, there's a chance here for redemption. There's a chance to fix the wrongs that have been done, and you can right them if you're careful enough. But then by the time it got past that section, you basically just had to admit defeat, because the rest of the song went right back down to that more depressing sound. And while there was that swell there at the end that could be used as a transition point, that could be used to go back to the first version, the second version, or loop back at the start of this one, depending on how it's used, or going into an end screen, for example. I'm not sure if these loop or how long they loop for when you get these songs, but this is really cool because it has that section of, you have a chance, don't stop fighting yet. And it only lasts about 30 seconds before it just gives up on you, which in all the ways that feels like they're giving you a shot and they're patting you on the back like you can still do this, they do not let it linger for any longer than patience would allow. And I don't think there's a lot of patience left at this point in a game anyway. So figuring just based off of what I've heard, that's kind of interesting, having that little section in there that's supposed to give you hope. It's definitely an uplifting sound, way more major chords, like I said, has a lot better tone to it. It gets rid of all the sound design stuff in there that was like creepy and crawly in there, and it just goes straight for your heartstrings and tries to make your soul feel like there's a chance. Even if there really isn't, they still want you to have that last push. But now for the sound design creepy stuff, I love all of that. There's a lot of stuff in here I can tell was just recorded by some dude with a microphone, probably whoever the musician was or whoever the actual sound designer for the game was, threw this in there afterwards. Either could be true, but I love some of these approaches and they feel kind of musical. There's a percussive element to them just because they are largely what sounds like people just kind of tapping on random metal fixtures with like hard objects. Could be pencils, pens, could be actual mallets and sticks. And that one in there that I mentioned sounded like a grate. I think it actually is a grate, and the only reason that I'm so confident on that is because I used to do that to some grates at my parents' house that were long on the floor, and they had that exact same sound when you grated your fingers across them. The tonal change there might sound like somebody doing that on a piano or something, like just the bare strings inside a piano, which I guess to an extent it probably could be as well, but I highly doubt it. I think it is because of the resonance of it. It feels so much more metallic than just a string would. There's a pretty large sonic difference to scraping your fingers on a metal grate and having all that sound bouncing around inside an air duct versus the sound just kind of bouncing around the inside of a piano chassis. It's a completely different tone, and that's why I'm so confident on that. I think that it was just straight up an air duct that they put a microphone up to. You can even kind of hear some rustling like before it actually gets to the scraping, and I think that sound is just kind of like them putting their hand up there to like get a stick or whatever they're scraping against the grate, and they're just getting it as close as they can, and you can kind of hear them like finagling their hand into position. I'm not sure exactly how they would have done this directly, but I definitely think it's an actual grate, and that sort of sound design stuff is why I love these sorts of songs with these sorts of approaches. They just allow the musicians and the composers and whoever else had a hand in this to just have a good time, to really mess around with their environment, to literally make it sound like there is something here with you, and whatever it is wants you gone, because it's getting close enough that it's in the duct above your head, and that is a terrifying concept. It kind of makes me wonder how the rest of the sound design in Library of Ruina is, because if it's anything like this, where it's just in the music and they actually have sound design elements scattered throughout to make you really feel off, or if it's more like that in Limbus Company, for example, I wouldn't know, but I hope that they have some of the sound design stuff in there and that it's not only in the music. Unless, I guess, if the music is playing all the time, then at least I could let it slide, but I really like the inclusion of it here, especially given the tone that you're supposed to be feeling. But I think that's about all I've got to say here. I have said plenty. This raw recording is now 32 minutes and running, so thank you all so very much for being here. If you have any other songs from Limbus Company, Library of Ruina, or anything else from Project Moon that I haven't gotten to yet, please leave a comment down below and I will do my best to get to it as always. And of course, if you just enjoyed this video, despite how long it was, and you want to see more videos in the future, despite how long they are, you know how to follow me and support me and all that, and I will see all of you in the next video. Goodbye!